Hi, it's Mrs. Cox with our DT challenge for this week. And as always, this is a family DT challenge. You can do it at any age and you can choose whether you do the easier version or the harder version. On this video, I'm going to talk you through some of the background to our challenge, which is to make a tower. And then on the other video, I'll give you some practical ideas about how you could do that. So I'll share my screen and we'll find out all about towers. So this is the London, we call it the skyline. It's what you would see if you looked across London, our capital city of England. And the first thing you notice is there are lots of tall buildings, and sometimes we call these skyscrapers, and they're a kind of tower. And if we look at the Manchester skyline, we can see the same thing. This is the very famous Beetham Tower. I think it is still the tallest building in Manchester, but I think some of these other ones that are being built might be taller in the end. So more very tall buildings have been built in Manchester recently. This is the Lloyd's Tower in London, and it's really famous because all of the lifts and the pipes and all the things that keep the building going are on the outside to have maximum rooms inside. And it was designed by the same architect who designed the very famous Pompidou Centre in Paris, which is perhaps the most famous example of an architect putting the pipes and all the engineering for the building on the outside. And it's designed by a really interesting architect called Richard Rogers. And what I didn't know is he's one of the most famous architects in the world. But listen to what he said. I thought I was stupid when I was at school because I couldn't read or remember my schoolwork. I couldn't read until I was 11, and it was only when I had my first child I realised I was dyslexic. So he's very inspiring because even though he thought he was so rubbish at school, he went on to be one of the most famous architects in the world. Okay, so we've had a look at some modern towers. This is a very ancient tower and it's in the Peak District and it's called Peveril Castle, and it's made of stone and it was very strongly built. They really got their design and build right because it's still standing hundreds of years after it was built. And this is a we call them a spire when they're on a church. This is in Gorton in Manchester, and it's a very old and beautiful monastery, and you can actually go in and have a look round, and in normal times you can have tea and cake there. It's a very nice building that some people are trying to look after and restore, and you can see it's got a front that goes up and then a pointy. We call it a spire when it's a point on the top. And lots of churches are tall and have towers or spires. And of course, the other religious buildings that are often very tall are mosques. And this is the world's tallest minaret. It's being built in Algiers by KSP Architecture. And you can see some of the team who've worked on it. They're all different ages and lots of young people, young women, real mixture of architects there. And look at the beautiful details they've put onto the mosque, and look how tall that minaret is. These are people down here, so it's very, very tall, an amazing tower. And it made me think about all the different reasons that people build towers. So Peveril Castle was built in the times of lots of fighting. It was in medieval times, and they needed to be able to see people coming from far away, and they needed somewhere very safe that they could hide in. So that's what their tower was for. This tower is called the Gherkin because it's supposed to be the same shape as a pickled gherkin. And lots of people now, when they build big towers, they want to build the biggest and the best. And I think this one, they did want to impress people, but also they wanted it just to be fun to look at. And it is, isn't it? You'd never forget seeing that building. But then religious buildings in different cultures and societies have slightly different purposes. They do want everybody to be able to see it. And if you go into a village or a town, often the first thing you see as you come into the village is the church or the mosque, because they stand out, they're bigger than other buildings, and often they have some kind of a tower. And in the old days, people did used to think that a tower pointed to heaven and made us think about God. But they also have a very practical reason, because in churches we often have bells, and in mosques we often have a minaret which calls people to prayer. And if that's high up, then the noise will travel further. So there's a really good reason to build a tower in a church or a mosque. But when we look at big cities, probably the main reason for building towers and building up is there's not a lot of space and everybody's fighting for the same ground. So if you can build what's called a skyscraper, because it scrapes the sky, you can get many more rooms on one small piece of ground. So that's some different reasons for building towers. It's really important that they get them right, because if you built a tower wrong and it fell down, that would be terrible. So there are two ways to build a good tower. One is to build foundations that dig down deep, 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 so that they hit some solid ground like rock, and the tower is secured to the rock way below the ground. And you can imagine, if you're building a very big tower, you're going to need very big foundations. And sometimes it's just not possible to go down to rock by normal digging. And then they put these long things in called piles. So they have a pile driver and they go down, down, down with quite almost, they look a bit like a tube, but they're a solid cylinder, a very long cylinder that goes down and anchors the building in the ground. I thought I'd show you a couple of towers that didn't work quite the way they were supposed to. These are both quite famous. But interestingly, they have stayed up. So some towers that were built in the medieval times that weren't very well built would have just fallen down, because not everybody knew how to build towers. But these are famous. The Chesterfield one is the twisted spire. And instead of being straight up like that, it's twisted round. The timbers inside have warped and twisted it, but the tiles haven't fallen off, so it's just there. And if you drive through Chesterfield, you will see it. And the other very famous one is the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And something has happened to the foundations and it's gone over on one side, but it's very stable. It's not dangerous. So it just stays there at an angle, and people go to visit it because it is so famous. And then closer to home, it's never going to fall down, but there is a quite funny story, and it's a personal story to me, about the Beetham Tower. So when the Beetham Tower was built, which was, I think, not that long ago, in the last 10 years, tall towers move in the wind. They just vibrate slightly. And what they realised is, when there was a big wind, the Beetham Tower makes a howling noise which people could hear for miles around, and it was keeping some people awake. And the reason this makes me smile is the first time this happened, people were posting about it on Twitter, like, what's that noise? And some of you will know that I'm married to a noise scientist. That's called an acoustician. He deals with acoustics. And the noise happened at about 11 o'clock at night one night, and he heard about it on Twitter, and he was in bed listening in bed looking at his phone, and he leapt out of bed, put his coat on over his pyjamas and drove into Manchester to record the sound of the Beetham Tower howling. And that's a picture of him from the Evening News saying that this is a professor of acoustic engineering at Salford University who recorded the humming sound that the Beetham Tower makes in high winds. So I think they did manage to do something to make it a little bit better, but I think you can still hear it making that noise in strong winds. Now, the question is, how will you build your tower? And I've got some examples here, and I wonder if you can spot what is in common for all of them, what's the same. So this one, somebody's made round paper tubes and put them on a strong base of a big cardboard box, and they've put some little pointy caps on the top of some of the towers, and then they've put castellations, little up and down shapes on others. This little girl has made a very impressive Lego tower. She's got lots of bricks at the bottom, and then she's just gone straight up very high. And this one has used a big box and a small box and then a tube. What do you notice about all three towers? I think you can see they've all got a strong base, and then the tower comes up from the base. In the other video, I'm going to show you some ideas for how you might make a tower, but let me just explain our chili challenges. So the first level is just to use your ideas to design a tower out of anything, and maybe explain to somebody what you did, and that would be the first level. If you want to make it a little bit more challenging, you could make a sketch of your tower and what we call annotate it. So you could add notes to explain your ideas. And then the hardest level of all is to design and make your tower, but then to write about how you designed it and how it fits in with its purpose or the culture and society that it's for. So when we design, we always think, who will use it? Who's your tower for? Are you building a tower for the Middle Ages for people to have battles in? Are you building a minaret for a mosque? Are you building a church tower? Are you building a skyscraper? What do people need in that tower? What does your tower need to be like? What ideas do you have? Can you make a prototype? Can you have a go and then improve it? Can you explain what you did, and can you do it better next time? So there's some information about different towers. There's your challenge. If you look at the other video, there'll just be some quick ideas about how you could go about making a tower. We can't wait to see your designs and ideas.